The Sydney Sweeney situation's getting crazier and crazier as it's dividing the internet. You've got more big Trump, Epstein, Maxwell updates as Trump seems to be prepping a pardon, and Maxwell just filed a Supreme Court brief. Why the Sig Sauer scandal has the gun community freaking out. Federal agents just got exposed making false claims on LA protesters. And Trump just admitted there's real starvation in Gaza, but what happens next? We're talking about all that and even more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show, your daily dive into the news. But first, an awesome announcement, a thank you. You guys made my new podcast, In Good Faith with Philip DeFranco, a top trending podcast on Spotify over the weekend. So thank you to everyone who's followed there and given 5 stars. And if you haven't yet, I'll make it the top link in the description. Definitely join. It's a great podcast. But that said, there is a lot of big news we have to talk about today, starting with this. You've got a Sydney Sweeney Nazi propaganda controversy playing out right now. Right? Because if you haven't seen, there's been this debate playing out after her new campaign with American Eagle just launched, where the tagline is Sydney Sweeney has great genes. Right? It's a play on words because the campaign is for American Eagle's denim line, but also genes like genetics. In some of the videos, they seem to use her genes to make a, hey, did you know Sydney Sweeney is hot joke, like this one.
My body's composition is determined by my genes. Hey, eyes up here.
Sydney Sweeney has great genes.
But then you've got a number of people feeling like others have a much different tone.
Genes are passed down from parents to offspring, often determining traits like hair color, personality, and even eye color. My genes are blue.
Sydney Sweeney has great genes.
And so you're seeing many out there feeling like that by emphasizing genetics, especially with Sydney's blue eyes and calling her genes great, the ad was essentially promoting eugenics, with some saying,
like a blonde-haired, blue-eyed white woman is talking about her good genes. Like, that is Nazi propaganda. I also am thinking about like all of the young girls who are doing their back to school shopping right now at places like American Eagle who are seeing ads like this. Yikes.
Praising Sydney Sweeney for her great genes in the context of her white, blonde hair, blue eye appearance, it is one of the loudest and most obvious racialized dog whistles we've seen and heard in a while. When those traits are consistently uplifted as genetic excellence, we know where this leads.
And that as you had others writing things like, I like Sydney Sweeney and American Eagle as much as the next guy, but we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children is a crazy tagline for selling genes. As well as something about an ad sexualizing a woman with blonde hair and blue eyes while commenting that she has great genes feels extremely conservative, especially in this political climate. And that is, you had many blaming Sydney for participating in the campaign and claiming it wasn't just a commercial, saying it was a love letter to white nationalism and eugenic fantasies, and she knew it. But you were also seeing tons of people in her Instagram comments pissed off at her, some pointing to the eugenics criticism and others just slamming her for doing another ad campaign that sexualizes her, with many of them saying that the campaign seems reminiscent of very controversial ads that Brooke Shields did with Calvin Klein when she was just a teenager, where she said nothing comes between her and her Calvins. And in one ad, she does a similar gene pun where she describes genetics, right? But there, many felt that those ads over-sexualized her, and now you have people thinking that it's odd for American Eagle to reference a commercial mostly known for sexualizing a child. Now with this, you had others pointing to the fact that in American Eagle's press release, you had the company noting that it created a Sydney gene meant to raise awareness for domestic violence, with sales from those pans going to a crisis text line. But then you had many arguing that given how sexy the ads are meant to be, you would never know that this angle even existed. So, it just appears that there's controversies at every corner, with criticisms notably growing especially loud over the weekend. With all of that said, Sydney Sweeney teaming up with American Eagle here, one, it appears to have actually been very good for American Eagle, at least as far as the stock price is concerned, with the stock seeing an initial massive jump, and then, with the backlash, there's been some fluctuations, but still it's been net positive. And two, you've also seen many people out there arguing that the backlash over this is overblown, right? Arguing that this is just a pun about Sydney Sweeney being very pretty, not a Nazi dog whistle. But then also we've seen people landing in a third camp where they think, whatever is going on, it just didn't land. Writing things like, I don't think American Eagle is some sort of Nazi company, or this is even 100% on purpose, but it's definitely capitalizing on ever-growing fascist sentiment in this country. And so, while we're seeing this debate play out, and depending on where you go on the internet, just massively different reactions, I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts here? Which of these 3 camps are you landing in, and why? And then, next up in the news, you've got Trump's Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell scandal growing, getting worse, and now taking on new crazy forms. Right, because you have Trump out there shouting, we had the greatest 6 months of any president in the history of our country, and all the fake news wants to talk about is the Jeffrey Epstein hoax. Trump seems to only be getting more and more exasperated as the Jeffrey Epstein scandal just won't die, with nearly a dozen sources telling the Washington Post that top White House officials underestimated the outrage, especially from Trump's own base, and he had hoped that the country would forget about the Epstein files and just move on. But now, according to 2 people familiar with this thinking, the president's becoming increasingly frustrated with his administration's handling of the scandal, and he is concerned that it is overshadowing his agenda. And the concern, it's well-founded, as you've seen reporters pestering him with questions about Epstein at pretty much every single press conference since the DOJ memo. For example, one asking about the DOJ's meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell during Trump's briefing alongside the Philippines president last week.
I didn't know that they were going to do it. I don't really follow that too much. It's sort of a witch hunt.
And then yet another asking about the same thing ahead of Trump's meeting with the EU's president on Sunday.
I don't know anything about the conversation. I haven't really been following it. You're making a very big thing over something that's not a big thing.
And then during the meeting itself, after Trump revealed a US-EU trade deal, another reporter brought up Epstein again with this question.
Mr. President, was part of the rush to get this deal done to knock the Jeffrey Epstein story out?
Oh, you got to be kidding with that. No, had nothing to do with it. Only you would think that.
With Trump later saying something else that many picked out because of his really unsettling use of the word privilege.
I never had the privilege of going to his island. And I did turn it down, but a lot of people in Palm Beach were invited to his island.
And so now the White House is reportedly really fraying internally over the issue, with one person close to the situation saying this is a pretty substantial distraction. While many are trying to keep the unity in many ways, the DOJ and FBI are breaking at the seams. Many are wondering how sustainable this is going to be for all the parties involved, be it the FBI director or attorney general. Which really brings us to what options are left for Trump here. Because first, he tried telling his base to just shut the hell up about Epstein and forget about it.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein?
With Trump calling the people that cared about this stupid and weaklings, among other things. Right, and then when that didn't work, he tried offering them a few small appeasements, like releasing the jail cell footage, moving to unseal the grand jury testimony, or squeezing something out of Ghislaine Maxwell.
I just wish her well, frankly.
And then when that didn't work, he was like, what other shiny things we got? What about MLK files, treason allegations against Obama, a new probe into James Comey, and anti-woke battle against the Washington Commanders?
Barack Hussein Obama, have you heard of him?
And while some of that, especially the Obama stuff, has gotten more of his people in line, it has clearly not worked as a whole, with many seeing all these things as seemingly what they are, just distraction. In polling, it shows that Americans aren't happy about Trump's handling of the files. Plus, Democrats have happily latched onto the scandal, and Trump's own supporters, they seem very invested into this whole story and simply won't let it go after a news cycle. But, very notably, despite his frustration, Trump has reportedly been hesitant to pull one of his favorite levers during a scandal: firing people. And there you have someone close to the president telling the Post that he is afraid that it might create an even bigger spectacle. But regardless, Trump can expect more updates to keep Epstein in the news, at least for a while. Not only because it's been confirmed that his name is in the files, but also because his Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche wrapped up 2 days of closed-door discussions with Ghislaine Maxwell for any extra information that he could use to appease Trump's base. And there you had Blanche promising on social media that the Department of Justice will share additional information about what we learned at the appropriate time. And that, as you had Maxwell's lawyer telling reporters,
Ghislaine answered every single question asked of her over the last day and a half. She answered those questions honestly, truthfully, to the best of her ability.
But then notably, he added that Maxwell had supposedly been treated unfairly for the past 5 years.
She didn't get a fair trial. We're still appealing to the Supreme Court. Remember, a juror lied to get onto the jury. She was denied bail. She was treated worse than an animal would be treated in jail when she was first held, woken up every 15 minutes. So we're just trying to get through the process where we are now and get her some relief.
With him then going on to appeal to the president directly, claiming that the government previously promised not to prosecute Maxwell and suggesting that Trump, as a great deal maker, wouldn't break a promise like that. Which, in addition to other things, has led many to wonder whether Trump's going to pardon her in exchange for information, perhaps her silence, or even in an attempt to exonerate him while maybe weaponizing her against his enemies. And when a reporter asked him about this on Friday, we saw this play out.
Would you consider a pardon or a commutation for Ghislaine Maxwell?
I'm allowed to do it, but it's something I have not thought about.
With him then giving this more dismissive answer to the same question on Sunday.
A lot of people are asking me about pardons. Obviously, this is no time to be talking about pardons.
But regardless, Maxwell is set to testify in front of a House committee next month after it subpoenaed her. And that is, today, she asked the Supreme Court to take up her appeal and overturn her conviction, arguing that she was shielded by the same promise that her lawyer mentioned earlier. With that, referring to a non-prosecution agreement covering alleged co-conspirators that Epstein signed in exchange for his guilty plea. Though notably, the appeals court argued that the agreement was made with prosecutors in Florida and it doesn't bind the authorities in New York. And so with that, if the Supreme Court takes her case, we're expected to find that out sometime this fall. Though, once again, in her filing, Maxwell's lawyer noted that we are appealing not only to the Supreme Court, but the president himself to recognize how profoundly unjust it is to scapegoat Ghislaine Maxwell for Epstein's crimes. So then notably, with this idea swirling around, you had NBC's Meet the Press asking House Speaker Mike Johnson whether he would support Trump pardoning Maxwell. And he showed off, let's call it his dodgeball moves.
Would you support a pardon or a commutation for Ghislaine Maxwell, a convicted sex trafficker?
Well, I mean, obviously that's a decision of the president. He said he had not adequately considered that. I won't get in front of him. That's not my lane. If you're asking my opinion, I think 20 years was a pittance. I think she should have a life sentence at least.
Then also that same day, Meet the Press interviewed GOP Representative Thomas Massie, who's become one of the most vocal critics of Trump and party leadership in recent weeks, with him previously criticizing Johnson for sending the House home for its 6-week summer recess early in an apparent effort to prevent them from voting to force Trump to release the Epstein files. And in response to the outrage, you had Johnson accusing Massie and others of trying to inflict political pain on their own own party. But on Sunday, you had Massey shooting back with this.
I don't know why it should be politically painful to be transparent. Is the pain he's talking about that somebody in our party will be embarrassed by those files? Then that's not a good excuse.
Now later, you had Johnson defending himself by attacking the motion that Massey and Ro Khanna wanted to vote on.
House Republicans insist upon the release of all credible evidence and information related to Epstein in any way. But we are also insisting upon the protection of innocent victims. And our concern is that the Massey and Khanna discharge petition is reckless in the way that it is drafted and presented. It does not adequately include those protections.
But you had Massey flatly denying that, with him telling the program.
Ro and I carefully crafted this legislation so that the victims' names will be redacted and that no child pornography will be released. So they're hiding behind that.
Right, and then while all that's playing out, you have the two people who sparked this whole Epstein saga in the first place, right? FBI Director Kash Patel and Deputy Director Dan Bongino. According to two sources who spoke to the Post, they've privately said that if they were in charge, they would have released the files while redacting victims' identifying information. And so with all that, this Epstein saga is shaking up to be one of the stickiest political scandals that Donald Trump has maneuvered through so far, which is really saying something, because just over the past 6 months, it's not even all of them, but you had Signalgate, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Qatar plane bribe, the Elon Musk feud, but all of those stories, they ended up blowing over within a couple of weeks. So some of the questions remaining is, will this Epstein episode eventually fade away like all the others, or is this going to be kind of one of those scandals that Trump just can't shake? Especially as you have more and more people arguing that it appears that Donald Trump is telegraphing a pardon for Maxwell. And then you've got more news in just a minute, but first, let's talk focus. Right? Who doesn't need a little help getting in the zone these days? Because I know I do. Between news updates, emails, the never-ending flow of information, it can be tough to concentrate. That is, until today's sponsor, Brain.fm, which has been a game changer for me. I've tried all the solutions, random playlists to background noise from YouTube, but nothing helped me stay focused. Thing is, unlike those random playlists, Brain.fm's music, it's designed by scientists to sync with your brain's patterns, boosting your productivity. They've got different modes like deep work, creative, and motivation tailored to what I need at the moment. And for anyone who has ADHD, they have a mode specifically made for that. And for me, it just feels like it's helped me stay on track. I get in the zone faster and stay there longer. It's what I've been using as I've been setting up podcasts, expanding the network. It's been great. Plus, Brain.fm's technology was awarded a National Science Foundation grant for improving focus, which is super impressive. Even recently published a study in Nature that shows their music boosts attention networks and helps improve task performance. And again, especially for those with ADHD, even for folks like me, it's been a lifesaver when I need to get stuff done and when I want to relax or fall asleep. And say, if you want to try it for yourself, this is awesome. Get 30 days free by going to brain.fm/DeFranco or scan that QR code. That's brain.fm/DeFranco for a month of productivity boosting music. And then next up in the news, we've got to talk about how you have a 21-year-old airman dead and the weapon meant to protect him may actually be to blame, with now widespread accusations and viral videos pointing to the Sig Sauer pistol having major issues. So the man killed was 21-year-old Braden Lovin, who had been serving out on a base in Wyoming, but also beyond that, military investigators aren't giving many details. And officially, all we know is that, quote, the incident involved a firearm discharge that is currently under investigation by Air Force Office of Special Investigations and the Air Force Global Strike Command Safety Office in collaboration with the Air Force's security forces. With them then going on to add that at this time, no determination has been made regarding the nature of the discharge. And that, it had already raised some eyebrows, but then on Monday, you had the base suspending the use of Sig Sauer's M18 pistol, which was followed a few days later by Sig Sauer posting on X, "Our hearts are with the service members and families impacted by the recent reported event at the F.E. Warren Air Force Base. We proactively offered assistance to the U.S. military as they investigate the incident and remain willing to help in furtherance of their ongoing inquiry." With all of that seen as a massive clue that the likely culprit was the M18 pistol itself, and it led to accusations that the gun can just go off. Right, and that, it would already be a cause for concern since the M18 is used by all the military branches, but then you add in the fact that its civilian version, the P320, it's one of the most popular pistols in America, and there are a ton of people allegedly at risk. And so the big question at the center of this is, can the gun just go off? And this, it's where things get controversial, right? Some P320 owners and SIG itself claim that it's not possible if the trigger isn't intentionally pulled. And in cases where the gun does seem to accidentally fire, they often blame things like unofficial holsters for pressing on the trigger and allowing it to fire. However, this weekend you had a video by the Wyoming Gun Project going viral, and it showed that, yeah, it sure as hell looks like a P320 can fire unintentionally and in circumstances that should never lead to a gun firing. And this is also where I need to get a little technical, but I will make it quick. The SIG P320 is a striker-fired pistol, meaning that inside of the gun itself, there's a spring-loaded pin that flies forward when the trigger is pulled, that hits the bullet and goes boom. This is an extremely popular design across almost all modern pistols, with one of the only drawbacks being that it doesn't have a safety that actually prevents the firing mechanism from going off, unlike hammer-fired guns. Right, instead, striker-fired guns generally have a funky-looking trigger since it has a mechanism that needs to be pressed to even continue pressing the trigger. And that is specifically to prevent the gun from accidentally going off if the trigger gets caught on something, since the circumstances of something squeezing the trigger in a way that replicates it being deliberately pressed is extremely unlikely. Now, with all that said, look at the P320 and you'll notice something instantly. It doesn't have what some call that dumb-looking trigger like a Glock does or any Springfield or almost any other striker-fired gun does. That alone, it's not the end of the world, but couple that with the P320's allegedly poor build quality and it's a recipe for disaster, at least according to the Wyoming Gun Project. Right, and in the video, he uses a screw to simulate the trigger being slightly pressed and then starts doing things like pulling the gun in and out of a holster to see what'll make it go off. And what he discovered is that, and I'm skipping a lot of technical stuff here, is that the gun, it can go off if the trigger is slightly depressed and the slide, the top part of the gun, is hit.
There is no reason in hell, if you are touching, you're going through the firing sequence. Let's say you're taking up slack. You're a police officer and you decided you're going to shoot somebody and you're taking up slack in the trigger, and at the last minute they throw their gun down and you realize, oh, I'm going to stop. But you bump the slide.